Hey everybody, my name is Brianna Dance and I am the founder of Power of Care. If you're new to the channel, welcome. We talk about faith, lifestyle, how to be the best versions of ourselves. And on today's episode, I have a special friend and former coworker of mine, Kyana Bradley. She is the founder of Authentic Connections Therapeutic Services. She's a licensed counselor in Maryland and DC, and she loves to help others become the best versions of themselves. She's been doing this for over 12 years, and today we're going to focus on her story, how she overcame trauma, and the perspective shift that she's had in her own life and how she helps her clients. And I know she's going to help you and I today, so you don't want to miss this. Follow her and just get into this conversation. And trust me, we'll probably have to have more than one episode with her, but this today is going to be all about her story and who she is and where she came from. Thank you, and check it out. So you guys, today I have an amazing guest, Kyana Bradley.
Woo! Hey y'all.
Say hey, girl.
Hey.
So Kyana and I met at one of our former jobs. We were working with DC Youth.
Yes.
And I mean, we just connected, and once I followed you on Facebook, I was like, oh my gosh, like I would see you in passing, but I did, because we worked in different programs.
Right.
But when I got a hold of like all the things that you were doing outside of work, I was like, whoa, like Authentic Connections Therapeutic Services.
Absolutely.
Right? Let's get into it. You are a licensed counselor.
Yes, I am.
Tell us a little bit about why you even wanted to be a counselor.
So let's go back. We're gonna take this back, back in time, right? So I grew up in Washington, DC, Northwest, and I remember my senior year in high school. It was my senior basketball game. I played basketball in high school, and this was the first game my first and last game that my mother actually came to. My mother was actually on drugs and alcoholic when I was growing up. And she didn't come to any of my games, and she came to this game. And I was so excited. You know how that is. I was so excited. I was like, oh, I'm about to show off. And then, but what happened was maybe 5 minutes into the game, I went up for a rebound and came down and sprained my ankle really bad. So I wasn't even able to finish the game and had to go to the hospital, and I ended up getting a cast and all that other stuff. But the playoffs was maybe a week or two away, and they was like, your season is over. And I was like, who you talking to? No, not my senior year. And so I ended up going to the training room to get better. Like, I wasn't even, going to class. And kids, I'm not telling you not to go to class. It was my time, because I graduated, my senior year. I think I had like a 3.5 or 6. So I was still doing my work. And I would go to the training room every day. So that means I had to interact with the trainer. His name was Terry. And in that, he asked me what my goals were. He was just talking to me and engaging with me. And I loved it. I had a lot of beautiful people in my life growing up, and, other coaches, Coach Michelle, Coach Maureen, Coach, Anna. And there was so much, Overton. I got so many people that I can name, right? Mm-hmm. But Terry was the one, when we were sitting down, it was like a one-on-one time, and it was constant because I was trying to get better, and I had to do the alphabets with my ankle. Anyway, I said, Terry, I want to do what you just did. I wanted to make athletes feel how I felt. I felt heard, right? And at this time, though, I didn't know about therapy, right? The only thing I knew about therapy was not even counselors, it was social workers. And actually, because I was on welfare, social workers were not, welcome, really. It was, you gotta get things together. It wasn't about being authentic. It was about presenting yourself in such a way so you could still get those food stamps. You might not know what a food stamp is, but it was paper, right? It was paper before it was card.
I heard about those.
You heard about it, right? And so that's how I decided. What's funny is I went to school to be a physical trainer so that I can help athletes and listen to athletes. Right. But I thought that's the way I had to go about it, right? And so in me going to school, I realized I don't like touching feet. I don't like nothing medical. I never said I wanted to be anything medical. Right. And like I said, growing up in a household, I'm first generation college, nobody knew the process. So I really God really just looked out for me and going. And I had a wonderful school, Waynesburg College, now university. They put me right in, and I was like, wait, this is not for me. I need to figure out. So I went to the counselor suite, and she helped me to understand different majors and careers. And I took the Myers-Briggs test, and that's when I realized it was saying on that test, I was a social worker, counselor, teacher, pastor, artist. It was more in that round. And I said, well, what's a social worker? What's a counselor? And the rest, as we shall say, has been history.
Wow. So you started off you thinking you were going to go one way, helping athletes, but still ended up helping in a way because someone heard you and you wanted to do the same thing.
Absolutely.
Wow. So you grew up in DC. You mentioned the relationship with your mom.
Yes.
Tell me more about you and your mom's relationship now, or is there one? And how did you, would you experience with her that made you want to be, loaded?
Yes, loaded. So my relationship with my mother, like anytime when you think about substance abuse, it is a disease, right? It has nothing to do with the people outside of that person, but absolutely the people outside of that person are affected, negatively affected. And but it took me years to understand that. And growing up with an alcoholic parent, the thing that it was difficult for me to understand was I was worthy. I was enough. It was very difficult for me to understand that because my mom would switch, right? One minute she would be happy and the next minute she'll be mad and yelling at me and cursing at me, and I had no idea. And this started as a child. Right. And so I developed a lot of tough skin growing up. And I know now, see, I used to work with the youth in DC, and I tell them, I'm from the hood too. I'm from the hood. Right. And they like, from the hood? Where you from? Where you from, Miss K? I say, I'm from Northwest. That ain't no hood. Now, it look a little different now, but honey, I'm telling you, back in my day, And so I grew up in a space where I used to walk home from school and literally people would come up to me and said, I heard you want to fight me. And I would have to fight right then and there, just walking by myself. And so with my mom, she wasn't capable, right? She wasn't capable of giving the love that I desired back then. But I didn't understand that she wasn't capable. I just thought, right, as a child, you don't know how to compartmentalize. You don't know how to say, oh, it's a disease and she's dealing with her stuff. No, as a child, I'm just saying, what is it about me that's causing my mom to be so angry? It must be me. And in births the codependency, right? In birth, births the person who has to now people please, right? My people pleasing came about because my mom, when you have somebody who is struggling with substance abuse, because they're up and down, you don't know what you're going to get. So you have to learn how to evaluate their moods. Yeah. You have to evaluate their moods and you have to make sure, okay, she's angry. Let me stay out of her way. She's angry. Let me go, she's nice right now. Now I can do this, or I can ask for that, or I can't ask. And you learn how to basically put other people's needs and feelings above you. So if I wanted to be happy and she wasn't happy, oh no, I'm not walking around happy because I'm gonna get yelled at for being happy. If I wanted to be sad, I can't make her sad. So one of the things with my mom too, because of substance abuse, she would a lot of times threaten to commit suicide, right? And this is all before, this is like elementary school into junior high school. And where one time we had to call the ambulance and because she's threatening this, and this is a child. How does a child process this? This is why I say trauma is so important. And, so important to address, become aware of it, and actually process it so that you can heal from it, right? And so once I grew up and I learned how to navigate through that, I told another person, I remember the time where I decided to stop crying, right? As I was in middle school, and my mom had overdosed, and I did. Of course, none of it is hindsight 2020. I didn't know the terms back then, but I know them now. Right. And the ambulance came up, and they did the whole shock your system. I forgot what that's called, but they put the two things. Forgot. Yeah. And I was so scared. I was crying. At first, nobody wanted to call the police because of what they were doing and then I was so scared. And then my mother woke up laughing. And I remember saying, I would never put that much energy. Because remember, I'm still a child, right? I'm still a child. At this point, I'm a teenager. I'm a teenager, preteen, but I'm still a child. I don't know how to process this. So I say, I'm not going to cry. And so giving you some background of what I had to be able to become aware of, admit, see how it affected me, and then process. And so growing up, my mom, she learned how to be, and because of her own trauma, she learned how to depend on other people. So she became very manipulative. Right. Again, another codependency, how my codependency issues come about. And when you think about codependency, my needs don't matter, your needs matter. I do for everybody else. And I lay down my life for everybody else. And then I'm mad because I feel like people ain't putting in the same type of energy I'm putting into the relationship. Yeah. But the reason is because I'm actually overcompensating. Because remember, codependency is birthed out of I'm not enough. I'm not worthy enough. So I have to please you, because in my mind, unconsciously, that's the only way that you're going to think that I'm enough.
I want to park on codependency.
Okay.
So you said that codependency is basically like people pleasing, right?
Yes.
And it comes out of not feeling enough.
Right. So codependency is actually birthed from treating alcoholics, right? Mm-hmm. What they're saying, what it came about was they found that alcoholics typically has a person that is supporting their habit. And that person is, because the alcoholic is dependent on alcohol, then you have a codependent individual who is dependent on that person and what that person is struggling with. Mm-hmm. So a lot of times, for instance, if you see an alcoholic who, says, my alcohol is not that bad, my bill's being paid and all this is being paid, it's typically that codependent person who's making sure that everything is staying up, right? Because and they're making sure everything is staying up for that individual, and they are forgetting about themselves.
Is it fair to call that also enabling?
Absolutely. Okay. Absolutely. Yes. So they enable the alcoholic to stay in that state because the alcoholic never has to face their consequences because you had this codependent person. So then that's why I can't remember the timeline, but that's when they started treating not only the alcoholic, but they realized they had to start treating whether that was the husband, the wife, the spouse, the child, whoever was supporting that, right? Yeah. So that because if you was going to heal the alcoholic, you also had to help heal the codependent person.
Yes. So as a child, how does a child navigate that? Like you said, you didn't know when you were a child, but now you're an adult and you can and move differently. But what do you say to that child who's in that situation, or that cousin, or whoever, the parent, the spouse who's in that situation? What can they do?
So of course, now in my practice, I come across this, right? Mm-hmm. And I remember I had a teenager who was struggling with this, and it was so amazing. And why I say amazing is because I'm thankful that I get to help him process this during that time, right? A lot of my processing came afterwards, right? But helping him, and one of the biggest things he struggled with was the fact of, why don't my mother love me, right? Why would my mother choose to not feed me and drink alcohol? Why would my mother choose the alcohol over my well-being? That's hard for a child to process. Yeah. One of the things you first of all is to recognize the alcoholic, the person who's struggling, they're struggling with a disease. Right. It has nothing to do with you. But although it feels like it doesn't. Because even if you take you away, your mother still will deal with this. Right? Well, even when so my mother didn't stop drinking until I was maybe in my early 30s. So this was a long while. And so one of the things you have to recognize is that people's perceptions or people's how they approach you is not a reflection of your worth. That's difficult though, right, Brianna? That's difficult because it's your mother, right? It's the person who birthed you. That is supposed to be the person that loves you no matter what. I was just listening to Boys and Men, the Mama song, right? That's what, you was there for me even when I was bad, right? All that stuff. You showed me right from wrong. But what happens to those kids whose parents didn't have it in them to be able to show right from wrong because they was trying to cope with their own issues and their own. So the first thing I would say is separate what your parents do from who you are.
Yes.
Right.
I love that you said that because we do sometimes, or I've been guilty of internalizing people's behavior as if it is me.
Yes.
When it's like, no, they responded to you this way because of something that's going on within themselves.
There it is.
I learned through therapy because I've been in therapy myself for years, and it's a plug. I know you're not accepting the clients right now, y'all. She's not accepting any more clients.
No.
But follow her Facebook because she still gives us amazing wisdom like she's given us now. But that, what you just said, really will free, it freed me when I heard it and learned it, that it's their response to you is not about you.
Absolutely. It's not a reflection of your worth. Their response to you is not a reflection of your worth.
Right.
And it's so difficult because it feels that way. Right? Because as a child in different developmental stages, you don't know, especially, when you're elementary school age, you don't really process yourself away from your parents.
Right.
And so now when you're a teenager, that's when you are starting to now say, identity versus role confusion. That's a developmental stage. And what that says is I'm now trying to find my identity outside of my parents. Yet, if my identity was never formed from something healthy, when I go out and try to find my identity in this form, I'm still going to try to find somebody who's going to make me feel good about myself because I don't feel good just being me.
Ooh, so talk about that with the relationship. So because of that feeling, you hop to different things or people. Can you talk about how maybe in your life, unhealthy relationships, if you experienced any?
Absolutely.
What you learned from those situations?
So the very first question you asked me, I'm gonna tie it back to that with my relationship with my mother.
Yeah.
I didn't really start my personal growth journey until 2009. And the reason why I started in 2009 is because I had a friend and I was very codependent on this friend. Like in codependency, when you have enmeshment, when I'm talking about enmeshment, I'm talking about when I exist, you exist. But enmeshment says we're together. We are how I feel, you feel, how I think, you think. And that's enmeshment. No, interdependency says I have a thought process, you have a thought process, and we can come together and figure out how we can get on the same page, but we both have our own individual thought processes, right? That makes sense?
Yeah.
And so now, but when I was in this friendship and I had a business and I was helping young girls, I was doing workshops, I was doing retreats and just a lot of great things. But I wanted this friend, I just expected her. Basically, I found out that I expected her to give me that love that came from my mom, right? I wanted her to think like me. I wanted her to be, unconsciously though, right?
Right,
unconsciously. This is not stuff where I'm like, hey, I want you to be like me. I want you to, or I need your constant approval of me.
Right.
Right? And it's not that I'm walking around saying, approve of me, validate me, right? And it was in that I went to counseling, and my therapist brought that out. And she brought out my lack of boundaries. So another thing what we're gonna get into with this as well is that I found out, I never really processed my molestation. And so she, that was some of the questions. So when people have a difficulty saying no, right? It's typically, not always, right? I don't do absolutes. Right. But typically it's coming from a standpoint of somebody being, you know, we would think that it's coming from a standpoint of molestation or rape. Mm-hmm. Right. Mm-hmm. And so for me, I found out my molestation because when you think about rape and molestation, the person needs matter. My needs don't matter. Right. I'm uncomfortable in this space. I'm uncomfortable with what's happening, but I have to shut myself up so that they can be comfortable. So that actually just reinforced my codependency, right? Because again, codependency is all about everybody else matters, I don't matter, and I have to win their approval in order for me to feel like I matter. Yes. Right? Yes. And so moving forward through this, the first relationship that I'm aware of is that relationship. And of course, codependent relationships don't work, right? No. And from that, I learned that I had issues with my mom still. I thought I had gotten through those, but it was because, right? A lot of times we think we get through stuff, but if you're never tested, right? Ooh. If it never comes into your space, you wouldn't know about it. That's why I feel like, you know, nobody told me, Kyana, hey, it might be a good idea for you to go get your own therapy because, you know, you are coming from a lot of trauma. Everybody who experiences trauma won't have a trauma reaction, but typically people do have trauma reactions. Yeah. Right? Yeah. And I actually started graduate school later. I graduated undergrad in 2003, and then I didn't start graduate until 2007. So by 2009, I had been through classes. And by this time also, the professors are now pushing us to go to therapy too. Yeah. Right? If you are a therapist, you go to therapy. And that was one of the reasons why I also decided to go to therapy. And this is where I started to understand and talk to the little Kyana. Because remember, little Kyana, she never got she was not parented. Right. She was not validated. She was not told that she was enough. She was not told that your needs matter and other people's needs matter. Right. She was not taught how to say, you know, you belong in this room. Mm-hmm. Right? Your thoughts matter, your voice matters. She wasn't told that. And it was through my therapy, it helped me to go back. And now I personally, the adult Kyana, had to go back and start parenting the younger Kyana.